Okay, here's my left-handed view on the corner to corner. So I'll show you how to make a square or a rectangle, because the square is easy. The rectangle is the one that can get confusing. Now I'm using worsted weight yarn and I'm using a size 4 hook just because I like to have it nice and tight and minimal holes. And I'm also modifying it because I'm going to do 4 chains instead of 5, like some of the patterns that I've seen would say. I had made a blanket with 5 chains, and my son uses it very extensively, and now it's starting to stretch and getting holy, and it's losing that puffiness that I love so much. So that's where I think the 4 might come in handy. Make a nice durable thick blanket. And the other reason I'm doing this video is because I'm left-handed. Yay for all the lefties. So here we go. Most of you should probably already know how to do some of this stuff, but if you don't, I will go nice and slow if I can. So I take my yarn and I make a loop coming around and over top. So I have the X and then I pinch the X and then I bring the yarn underneath. And then I put my hook in through the hole and I grab underneath the last piece and I pull up and I have my slip knot. Pull it nice and tight, but not too tight because I have to be able to pull something through it. And then this is going to be the nice fixed part, and I'm going to hold that and we're going to chain 4. So we're going to pull the yarn through and up for 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to take and do 3 double crochets in the last chain from the hook, the very first one that we made. So to do a double crochet, I take the yarn over from behind the hook. So again, from behind, and then I push through the stitch I'm going to work in, and I do that again. So again, it's over from the back, up and over the hook, and then I draw it up, and I've got 2 loops. So I have my chain, the loop I made before I went through the stitch, and the loop I pulled up through the stitch. Now when I'm finishing off a stitch, like a double crochet, for me, I find it easier to pull the yarn by coming now in front of the hook, twisting the hook to the back, and drawing up the loops intended, and then twisting it back. You'll have to find your own feel for it. That's just how I do it. And voila. And we're going to do 2 more of those. So, one. And there we have it. We have our first row, and it's 1 block. It's not too scary yet, but this is where it can get fun. So basically, I'm going to chain up for the beginning of the next block, build the block back this way, slip stitch into this space, the chain space, build another block up and over, and then that'll be the end of my row. So just like we did with the other one, we're going to chain 4. And we're going to come back, and instead of going in the last stitch, because it's going to be really tight, right, and it's right up against the block, we're going to go in the 3rd stitch, the second last one. So yarn over, put the hook in the stitch, draw up a loop, and finish your double crochet. And again in the same stitch, and again. Now we've got 2 blocks. We've only got 1 spot on the first block where there's a chain space, so you want to find that, make sure we haven't had any twisting, and then we're going to put the hook through the space, pull the yarn through and then right on through our loop that's on our hook to make a slip stitch. Then we're going to chain 2 and double crochet 3 times in that chain space. And there's row 2. Bingo! So let's do row 3. We're going to increase again, chain 4, then 3 double crochets in the 3rd chain from the hook. And find that chain space in the next block, slip stitch to it, and then chain 2, 3 double crochets in the space, again slip stitch in the next block's chain space, chain 2, 3 double crochet in the same space. And there we go. We've got 3. So I can't even begin to wonder why everybody loves this pattern so much. It is fun to work, because it feels like it works fast. It's a little annoying because you don't have like a straight edge underneath you, and the corners sort of get in the way. But I like it because it makes a nice puffy texture and a nice thick blanket. Because a lot of people complain about crochet items because there's holes in it, but they can't appreciate the stitch intricacy, I guess. There's a lot of other questions like, what size hook do I use? What size yarn do I use? Well, I'm going to tell you, you're going to use whatever combination works. So sometimes you might have to build it up a couple rows and pull it out because you don't like the way it's looking. You might, if you think it's too loose, then either double up the thread, like use 2 threads together, and a bigger hook, or just use a smaller hook. A smaller hook will make it tighter. Thicker yarn will make it tighter with the same hook. A bigger hook will loosen it up. So ultimately you just have to play with it. Other question people will have a lot is, how many rows do I go before I start decreasing? And the simplest question to that is, the answer to that is, I can't tell you. Because if you use a different hook variation to make it tighter, it's not going to cover the same ground. If you use a bigger hook to make it looser, it's going to cover more ground. So I would be wrong if I told you when to decrease. The best advice that I can give you is to know the measurements of what you're making it for and just measure it. And then start decreasing. It's not like it's going to get any bigger after you decide to start decreasing it. The other thing you could do is just lay it on top of whatever you're planning to cover. So lay it on the mattress you're making it for. Lay it on the legs. If you're making an afghan, lay it on the person to see how it fits. And then keep going if you want to or not. It's very easy to customize, and because of that, like, you have to be able to customize when you're going to decrease. To keep the video short, I'll just start decreasing this now. So we'll make a bit of a rectangle here. What you got to remember is, if you increase on both sides, on both ends of the row, what you're going to end up with is an extra block. So the first row we had 1 block, the second row we had 2, and the third row we had 3. So if I increase on both ends again, so I increase with the chain 4 space and increase by building a block on the other end, on the 4th row I'm going to have 4 blocks. If I decide to increase on one end and decrease on the other, what I'm going to end up with is the next row is going to have the same number of blocks as the row I just finished. So that's a way that you can keep track and make sure that you're doing it right and you haven't like gotten distracted by whatever's going on around you. If I'm decreasing on both ends of my row because I'm trying to finish it off, I'm going to end up losing a block. So if I decreased on both ends of the next row, I would go from 3 blocks down to 2. So in summary, increase on both ends of the row, you're going to gain a block. Increase on one end and not on the other because you're trying to make it rectangular, and you're not going to change the number of blocks you have in each row. Decrease on both ends of the row and you lose a block. So in this case, we're going to decrease on this end and we're going to increase on this end of our row because we want to make it rectangular. If you want to make it square, you just start decreasing on both ends of the row. Plain and simple. So to decrease on this end of the row, I'm going to turn my project around and I'm going to use the slip stitch because a slip stitch allows me to move along my project without making any stitches or adding much girth. So I just put my hook through the stitch, pull the yarn through and straight through the loop on my hook and through the next one and the third double crochet. Now, because each block when I connect it, the next block I'm built up after I've slip stitched into the chain space. So I'm going to do one more slip stitch into that chain space. So it'd be just like normal. And then we're going to double chain twice and then 3 double crochets for our first block on this row. And life is normal until we get to the end. So slip stitch in the chain space, 2 chain, and 3 double crochets. So that's 2 blocks. So if I'm making a rectangle, I need a third block, right? Because I had 3 in my last row, so I need to have 3 again. So I have to build one up. So this is my increasing side. As long as I'm still adding length to my rectangle, I'm going to have an increasing side and a decreasing side, no matter what direction I'm going. You don't want to increase at the beginning of every row, because that would not work. You want to decrease on the decrease side, increase on the increase side. So go ahead and put a marker, like one of those like little marker things in there, or a piece of yarn of a different color to remind you which side you're increasing on, or mark the side you're decreasing on, whatever's gonna keep it straight in your head. So I just increased on this side, so I want to increase again. So I would do the chain 4 to start another block. And then double crochet 3 double crochets in the third chain from my hook. And tie that block into the next with a slip stitch in the chain space of the next block, 2 chains and 3 double crochets in the space. Now remember, we're increasing on one side and decreasing on the other, so we want to have the same number of blocks that we had in the last row. And the last row was 3. Now I already have 2, so I only need 1 more. And you just got to keep it straight for the first little bit. And once you get a couple rows into your rectangular part of the pattern, it'll be very visual and you'll be able to remember quickly. Alright, so here we are. I'm going to tie it in to the next block, but I don't want to build another one So I whip it around and I do my slip stitches to carry me to the start of my next block. Through all 3 double crochets and 1 in the space, and then we go ahead and build the next one. This was my decreasing side. So that was 1. Now, here is where we can get funky. So I've got 2 in, and if I was to continue, well, I'm almost got 2 in. Let me finish it. Da, da, da. Bingo. Finish it off with the tie into the next block. Okay. So I have 2. If I was to continue up with this rectangular pattern, if I wanted to keep adding to this dimension, I build my 3rd one and I continue. But let's tie this off so I can show you how to end the project. And now if I'm decreasing on both sides, I'm going to go from having 3 in a row to having 2. So I already have my 2. So I just whip it around and slip stitch to carry me to the next one, which is 1 all by his lonesome, and we will be done. And tie it into the next one in the chain space. And you could be done there, or we could just whip around and slip stitch to the end to get the yarn to the end. Totally your call. Yarn is at the end, so snip snip and pull. And we're done. That's it. Got a rectangular shape. Some people like the way it looks just by itself. I have no complaints. But I always like to do some sort of finish. I found the one that I did, I had a border with half double crochets. It was nice and tight. It's a nice thick border, and so it helped keep its shape really well to keep the puffiness there. But again, experiment. There's so many different things you can do. So I hope this answers a lot of your questions. And have fun. And the sky's the limit, guys. Happy crocheting.